Hey folks, Nick here from Another BookTube channel, and today we're continuing the Swamp Thing read-along with Swamp Thing number 39. This is actually one of the issues that I don't have a physical copy of, so we're back to the trade paperback, volume 3. And with this issue, I do think we're also back on track in terms of creativity and just story-wise and art-wise. If you watched the previous episode of this read-along, which you definitely should, so that you have the proper context for what's going on here. I wasn't a huge fan of issue 38. It was just a bit bland, in my opinion. Not up to the standards of Alan Moore's writing or the art that we're used to, because it wasn't Bissette or Veach doing the artwork. But we do have everybody back now. The original creative team, Bissette's back, Totlebin's on there, and Alan Moore is back to doing Alan Moore things. So we pick up with Swamp Thing, who has gone underwater. He's gone to Rosewood, Illinois, to investigate this sunken town that he had gone to way long ago. He was responsible for the sinking of the town, burying it underwater, and now vampires are thriving there. And John Constantine has recruited him to solve this problem. So Swamp Thing's going to figure that out. Meanwhile, there were some boys who were unlucky enough to be swimming in the lake that is covering Rosewood, and one of them was turned into a vampire, and another one is now left behind as a hostage. So we open with Swamp Thing walking through the underwater community while the parents of the children are trying to get answers from the kids about what's going on. Like, where's Nikki? Where is Howie? And something I'm going to point out here, and it's going to come up more throughout the issue, and it's something that's been going on throughout the series that I really should have brought attention to earlier. It's Alan Moore's ability to cross-cut between different relevant events and use the narration or use the dialogue to segue into a new scene. Now, in this case, it's all happening simultaneously. So, in the narration, I'll read off here. This is their neighborhood. This is the place where they are safe. Safe to live and worship as they choose. Safe to raise their children. It is the children that are important. The neighborhood must protect its children, for they are the blood of the community. They are at the heart of all its values. No harm must come to them. Meanwhile, this is cross-cutting with the parents slapping their kids around to try to get the answers as to where the other kids are currently found. And it's also relevant because in the previous issue, the big vampire mother laid a bunch of eggs. So it's her children that are also being referred to here. The name of the issue is Fish Story, which is everybody kind of has a fish story, or anyone that's ever gone fishing or knows someone who fishes has a fish story about the one that got away, or they exaggerate, like I caught a fish and it was 2 feet long, or instead of just like a thing like this. That's kind of what it's referencing there. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep up with the narration, because we get another one of those instances where the way that the narration ends, it starts talking about one thing and it ends talking about something else. So I'll start up here. This is their neighborhood, and I have come to deliver a blow from which it will not recover. This is the place where they are safe, and I have come to destroy it. A monster threatens their community. They will defend it by whatever means are necessary. And there's a few things happening here. First is that the narration bubbles change color. So the yellow is Swamp Thing. The blue tells us it's somebody else now. It's kind of like the hive mind of the vampires themselves. But it's also it's about the vampires who see Swamp Thing as a monster coming into their community. But the actual humans also have a monster that's entered their community. It's these monsters, the vampires, but also Swamp Thing is himself a monster that's entered their community. So it works on several different levels there. But in this particular instance, I think it's the vampire community looking at Swamp Thing, and they see him and they start coming out from all places, breaking through windows, coming out of car trunks, smashing through here, crawling out of houses and underwater manhole covers. And again, we get one of those segues where the last narration here from Swamp Thing is escape is not possible. And then it cuts to Howie, who's being held captive by Nikki, the first kid that turned into a vampire here. So the escape is not possible is relevant for Swamp Thing. It's also relevant for Howie, who is really in a not a good position, roped up, hanging upside down. And he's trying to plead with Nikki to let him go, but Howie says, I'm saving you, dummy. I'm saving you for the feast of the firstborn. Because he says, why haven't you killed me, or what's going on? So I'm saving you for the feast of the firstborn. They told me when it hatches, it'll be hungry, and children are the best. There's no nicotine or fat or poison in their blood, so children are like caviar. And he says that while he drains this swamp rat of its blood. Nasty stuff. They're continuing the color juxtaposition. The vampire kid who's faded of color almost completely compared to the living boy there. And once again, we get another one of those segues right away because Nikki's talking about how animals are pretty good tasting, but children are like caviar. And then we continue on with the tasting, where we switch back to the Swamp Thing vampire scene, and the first thing is its taste is vile. Because the vampires are trying to feast on Swamp Thing, they're trying to bite him, but he has nothing to him. He's just earth and dirt and grass. So there's no blood to sustain them. So they're trying to bite him and then just spitting it out. And they decide that while they can't hurt him, they can herd him to the place of the nativity, where they're basically leading him to this stadium where the eggs are currently hatching, and all of those vampire children are now going to be released. Meanwhile, the adults have gathered up a posse, and they're heading down to the lake to try to find Nikki and Howie. And they find them pretty quickly, and they think immediately, like, we found the children, but there's something wrong with Nikki. I think the children have hurt each other. And a couple things here. First off, this guy in the green, the gun-toting guy who's a little too gung-ho, he kind of says uncomfortable or unnecessary remarks about the various women here. So this woman here, who is Howie's mom, is staying calm, whereas Nikki's mom is really in tears the whole time. And he's commenting about how she's a real woman. The other one, what a blubbering mess. And so he's told to kind of shut up. And so we get him kind of painted this half shadow, kind of this guy's not the best. So maybe he's a little expendable, maybe. I also like this panel here, the degrees of color separation, where in the foreground it's full color, and then as it goes further, there's more shadow, and then even more shadow, and then it's completely shadowed back there. Good depth in that panel. And then again, the second thing is the narration leading into a segue. I think the children have hurt each other, and that goes into the vampire children that have hatched. They immediately start to eat each other because there can be only one left alive, and Swamp Thing watches this display horrified. And I guess it's not super clear here. I guess as they eat each other, they get bigger and bigger, instantaneously, because what the last one remaining is this guy who, if he came out of the egg like that, of course he was going to win. There was no chance. But he's the last one left alive, and he's got his sights set on Swamp Thing. First, though, he doesn't attack right away. He swims away, goes into the distance, but then turns around and just rams back into Swamp Thing and cuts him completely in half. You see his arm separated, his torso separated from his legs. But in the previous issue, we've set up that Swamp Thing hasn't figured out how to move his consciousness to a new body and create a new body. So here, Swamp Thing sees that his body is beyond repair, and so he just lets it go. and he sends his consciousness back out. He said, because he says, "I've got to do something else." And good narration. And my consciousness diffuses out into the dreaming undergrowth. I have been defeated. My body was not strong enough to withstand the creature's assault. It is my own fault. I am too human in the way I think, in the way I fight. I must learn to exploit the possibilities of what I am. My intelligence is a web of filaments and fibers. Its strands hum with information, bringing me word of the distant trees of the nearby root systems. I shape the disparate facts into a single coherent image. I feel the contours of the massive stagnant reservoir that Rosewood sleeps beneath. I run mental fingers along its edges, exploring its banks and shallows. Beyond, I sense the rushing of the once dammed river, and I know what I must do. Swamp Thing's got a plan, like this page layout of him sending his consciousness out. We get these curved panels, so it's leading our eyes very effortlessly down the page. And and the narration technically ends here, but I don't know if I can. So he knows what he has to do, but he doesn't know if he can do it. And that's, again, kind of relevant to what's happening here with the adults, because the majority of them see something's wrong with Nikki, very clearly. But his mom is just happy to see him again, so she rushes to him. The other adults are saying, like, hey, maybe there's something wrong, maybe you don't do that. But she goes up to him anyway, they hug, and Nikki starts to feast on good old mama and leads her into the water. His father tries to go after them, but the vampire creature, child, teenager surfaces, and it looks like dear old dad is going to be his first meal. I really like this panel. It reminds me very much of kind of EC horror and what that would look like. Because I think because of the coloring, like just the flat purple on the foreground image and the focal point being the only thing, that's like a kind of a different color that stands out. Everything else is pretty muted, but the pink kind of pops. And it's a horrifying image. It's scary. It works. I think that's a really strong panel. And this is another one here of the teeth. We get the inside view from the mouth of the extremely sharp teeth that are coming at him. We get the side view as well, where they look even sharper. And he gets chomped. Dad's been eaten. And our guy in green with the gun, he shoots the monster, thinks he's got him, doesn't work. He's eaten next. So there you go. He was expendable. We set him up as such. And as the remaining family is trying to escape, that's Harry and his family, Swamp Thing continues to reach out. And we kind of see in this lake here, we kind of see his face. We got the two eyes and his little triangle mouth as he continues to reach out. And he says, I begin to flex my muscles. And with that, the ground starts to shake as Howie and the family try to escape. And what is happening here is this incredible image. Swamp Thing has sent his consciousness out basically to the entire mountainside. Like the entire forest is now Swamp Thing. And what he does is that dam that, broke and diverted the water to cover Rosewood, he is now pushing the water out of Rosewood again to have it rejoin the river. And what this in effect does is it drains Rosewood and brings it back to the surface. So now it's no longer safe for the vampires because it's daytime and the depths of the water were keeping the light out. But now that they have nowhere to hide, the sun is out in full effect and they just melt on the spot. And it wipes out the entire town. So mission accomplished by Swamp Thing. Huge flex, turning into a whole mountain to do that. And later, John Constantine shows up to survey the scene. And I love this. Because he's only been around, this is his third issue now. We haven't gotten a ton of time with him, technically. But you know him really, really well because of because something like this sequence here, where he's walking through Rosewood and he just punts this skull out of the way, and he's just very casual and he's not really fazed by this, and it just tells you really everything you need to know about Constantine. He calls Swamp Thing out, says, "Come here, I don't have all day." I love this page where Swamp Thing regrows really quickly in front of John, because it's taken him a really long time in the past, but John times him and he says 51 seconds. That's pretty good. And Swamp Thing is saying, all right, I held up my end of the bargain. You owe me information. You owe me knowledge about myself. And Constantine withholds it again. He says, you botched this job, so why would I reward you for that? And Swamp Thing says, what do you mean botched? And Constantine tells him, people got out. The whole point of this venture was to stop the knowledge of what was happening at Rosewood from getting out into the world. Because now the story will get bigger as people keep telling it. Fish stories always do. And that's where we come into the title of the issue, Fish Story. Before you know where you are, everybody within 50 miles believes in vampires a little bit more, just as they planned it. And this is the first Swamp Thing's hearing of a greater they. And John tells him, use your head. The people who are behind all this, they're planning something very big, but they need the right sort of atmosphere to make it happen. And they've picked the right time, too, with all these red skies and funny weather patterns we've been having. Anyway, I've got to go. I'll see you in Kenneskook, Maine in 2 weeks. And Swamp Thing says, Constantine, I do not like you. Constantine says, you don't have to. See you in Kenneskook then? Perhaps. And Swamp Thing fades away, and we get a little joke here at the end. Constantine sees a pile of bones waiting at a bus stop. He tells him, don't worry, there will be 3 showing up at once in a couple of minutes. And he walks away with a little chuckle. Next up, The Curse. This issue was dedicated to the memory of the late Greg Irons. I'm not super familiar with Greg Irons, but I'll look him up. But yeah, that is issue number 39. I think it's a really solid issue. I think they found their footing again after kind of a shaky issue 38. Let me know if you agree with that sentiment. Let me know if there's anything that I missed in this issue. Thank you very much for spending some time with me today. Now, it's time to get back to reading.